Did you know there is a 44-mile-long river of hardened lava in New Mexico that cooled approximately 5,000 years ago, and the Bureau of Land Management operates a campground inside it today on lava so fresh and sharp it will cut through boot leather? Or that on July 16, 1979, a dam failure at United Nuclear Corporation's Church Rock facility released 93 million gallons of radioactive liquid waste and 1,100 tons of solid radioactive tailings into the Puerco River, the largest radioactive release in American history. And most Americans have never heard the name Church Rock? Or that on July 16, 1945, when the United States detonated the world's first nuclear weapon in the New Mexico desert, approximately 40,000 people lived within 50 miles of that detonation. None of them warned, none evacuated, none told what had been placed in the air above their families. Most people drive Interstate 40 through this state, photograph the balloon fiesta, and call it enchanting. Nobody stops long enough to understand that the desert beneath that highway was named for its body count 3 centuries before the United States existed. So settle in, because we're counting down 25 of the most dangerous places in New Mexico that will completely change how you see the land of enchantment. Stick around to the very end, because what we saved for last is documented, devastating, and was withheld for 77 years from the people who deserved the answer most. Coming in at number 25, the rock that should not be there. In the flat desert of San Juan County, New Mexico, on Navajo Nation land, a volcanic neck rises 1,583 feet above the surrounding plain. United States Geological Survey geological mapping of the Shiprock Quadrangle documents it as the eroded remnant of a volcanic conduit approximately 27 million years old, its summit at 7,177 feet above sea level, taller than the Empire State Building, rising from a flat desert floor. Multiple climbers died on its face before the Navajo Nation permanently banned all climbing in 1970. The ban is still enforced. Here's what Hollywood never told you. Most Americans associate dramatic volcanic necks with Devil's Tower in Wyoming. New Mexico's is taller, has been sacred for centuries, and has been legally closed to outsiders for over 50 years. The rock does not need your visit. Fact 24, the road named after its body count. The Jornada del Muerto, also known as Dead Man's Journey, is a 90-mile stretch of the Camino Real de Tierra Adentro, crossing the Chihuahuan Desert through Sierra and Doña Ana counties. National Park Service records for the El Camino Trail document its use from the 1590s through the late 1800s, with no reliable water source across its entire length. Hundreds died from thirst, heat exposure, and raids over 3 centuries of use. Spanish colonial records identify it as the most dangerous segment of the entire Royal Road. The same geographic basin, the Jornada del Muerto, is where the United States Army chose in 1945 to test the world's first nuclear weapon. The Spanish named it after the people it killed. 350 years later, the United States Army chose that specific basin for the first nuclear detonation in history. The basin already had a reputation for absorbing the cost of other people's decisions. At number 23, the city that left without a reason. Chaco Canyon in northwestern New Mexico was the center of the largest pre-Columbian civilization north of Mexico, at its peak between 850 and 1150 Common Era. The ancestral Puebloans built 15 great houses here. Pueblo Bonito alone held 800 rooms and 5 stories of precisely shaped sandstone, without mortar, without wheeled vehicles, without draft animals. Dendrochronological research at the University of Arizona Laboratory of Tree Ring Research documents a multi-decade megadrought preceding the population's departure. Smithsonian Institution Bioarchaeology at Pueblo Bonito documents evidence of elite violence. The road network, 400 miles of arrow straight roads up to 30 feet wide, aligned to cardinal directions, has no official explanation. The Great North Road runs precisely north from Chaco for over 30 miles and leads to nothing identified. The people who built it were gone before 1150. Nobody has explained the road, landing at number 22, the gorge that's still getting deeper. The Rio Grande Gorge near Taos reaches a maximum depth of approximately 800 feet below the surrounding plateau. The Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, completed in 1965 and managed by the Bureau of Land Management within Rio Grande del Norte National Monument, spans the gorge at 650 feet above the river, at its opening the second highest highway bridge in the United States. United States Geological Survey GPS Geodesy confirms the gorge is still deepening. The active Rio Grande Rift continues to pull the canyon floor downward tonight. A 50-story building placed in the gorge would not reach the bridge deck. The gorge was deeper when the bridge was built than it had been the day before. The rift has no interest in what humans build above it. Coming in at number 21, the lava that cooled while history was happening. The Carrizozo Malpais, near Carrizozo, New Mexico, is a basaltic lava flow approximately 44 miles long and up to 4 miles wide, covering roughly 125 square miles. United States Geological Survey Geologic Investigations, Series Map number 2809, dates this flow to approximately 5,000 years before present, among the youngest lava flows in the continental United States. The Egyptian Old Kingdom was constructing its first pyramid complexes when this lava was cooling. Bureau of Land Management's Socorro Field Office manages a campground inside it today. The lava is AA-type basalt, jagged, razor-edged, still sharp enough to shred equipment. Here's what Hollywood never told you. When Americans think active young lava fields, they think Hawaii. They think Iceland. This one is in New Mexico. It is a Bureau of Land Management campground, and the Little Black Peak vent system that produced it has not been classified by the United States Geological Survey as permanently extinct. At number 20, the supervolcano Yellowstone gets credit for. In the Jemez Mountains of northern New Mexico, the Valles Caldera is a collapsed supervolcanic caldera measuring 13.7 miles in diameter. United States Geological Survey Volcano Hazards Program documentation confirms it formed approximately 1.25 million years ago, ejecting roughly 75 cubic miles of volcanic material across much of the American Southwest. The Jemez Mountains volcanic field is classified by the United States Geological Survey as potentially active. Geothermal activity and hot springs persist inside the caldera tonight. Valles Caldera National Preserve receives approximately 40,000 visitors per year. Yellowstone receives 4 million. New Mexico has been storing enormous destructive energy in its geography for a very long time. The Valles Caldera stored 75 cubic miles before it released. The desert basin 130 miles to the south, the same basin that Spanish travelers named the Journey of the Dead Man, stored something else entirely beginning on a morning in July 1945. The families who lived nearest to that basin have been waiting for someone to get to their story for a very long time. We will get there. Fact 19. The dawn nobody announces. Every November and December, between 10,000 and 15,000, sandhill cranes descend on Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge near Socorro, New Mexico, 90 miles south of Albuquerque. United States Fish and Wildlife Service documentation for the refuge's comprehensive conservation plan records the pre-dawn mass liftoff as one of the loudest natural dawn events in the western United States, periodically visible on regional weather radar. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology documents this as among the largest regular crane concentrations in North America. The annual Festival of the Cranes draws approximately 15,000 to 20,000 visitors. Niagara Falls sees that in a single day. Every November, 10,000 cranes lift off from a New Mexico marsh before dawn in a sound that registers on radar, and almost no one outside this state is being told to go. Landing at number 18, the cave that breathes 400,000 wings every night. Carlsbad Caverns. National Park in southeastern New Mexico contains the Big Room, approximately 4,000 feet long, 625 feet wide, ceilings reaching 350 feet. The system holds 119 known caves and reaches 1,013 feet deep. Adjacent Lechuguilla Cave, also within the park, is the deepest known cave in the continental United States, at 1,604 feet with over 150 surveyed miles of passages. NASA Ames Research Center uses it as a Mars analog training environment because its biology is so isolated from the surface. Every evening from May through October, approximately 400,000 Brazilian free-tailed bats spiral out of the main entrance in a column so dense that Bat Conservation International documents it on Doppler radar. If 400,000 bats can find their way out of a 1,013-foot cave every single evening without a GPS signal or a subscription model, you can find the subscribe button on this channel. It is considerably closer to the surface. It is free. And unlike the bat emergence, it will not circle the entrance for 90 minutes before it tells you anything. The deepest cave in the continental United States is in New Mexico. NASA trains Mars researchers in the cave next door. The license plate has a roadrunner on it. At number 17, the sky that became a courthouse. Here is what nobody taught you about Acoma Pueblo. Sky City sits atop a sandstone mesa, 357 feet above the valley floor in Cibola County, New Mexico. Archaeological evidence documented by the University of New Mexico Department of Anthropology and the Pueblo of Acoma Historic Preservation Office supports continuous habitation since approximately 1150 Common Era, one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in North America. In January 1599, Spanish forces under Governor Juan de Oñatay besieged the mesa after Acoma warriors killed a Spanish scouting party. Between 600 and 800 Acoma people were killed in 3 days of fighting. Surviving men over 25 were sentenced by Spanish tribunal to have 1 foot amputated. All adult survivors were enslaved for 20 years. Oñate signed the order. The sentence was carried out and documented. This happened 21 years before the Mayflower landed. A bronze Oñate statue in Alcalde, New Mexico, had its right foot removed by activists in 1998. The pueblo is still there. The statue is in storage, coming in at number 16, the revolt that won. Here's what Hollywood never told you about 1680. On August 10th, coordinated by Pope, a spiritual leader from Okai Owinge Pueblo, the Pueblo people launched a simultaneous uprising across the Rio Grande settlements. Approximately 400 Spanish colonists were killed within 24 hours. 21 of New Mexico's 33 Franciscan missionaries died. Roughly 2,000 Spanish survivors fled south to present-day El Paso. The Spanish did not return to New Mexico for 12 years. This is the only large-scale sustained expulsion of European colonial settlers by indigenous people in North American history. The Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, built in 1610, the oldest continually occupied public building in the United States, changed hands that day. Pope governed New Mexico from it. American history curricula give this event 3 sentences. It held a European colonial government out of a California-sized territory for a decade. Fact 15, Hueldi. In the winter of 1863 and 1864, Colonel Kit Carson directed a scorched earth campaign against the Diné homeland. Crops burned, livestock killed, hogans destroyed. Between January and March 1864, between 8,500 and 10,000 Navajo people were force-marched 300 to 450 miles to Bosque Redondo Reservation at Fort Sumner, New Mexico in winter. The sick, elderly, and pregnant were left behind or killed. At Fort Sumner, the alkaline soil made farming impossible. Smallpox came. Firewood was scarce. Navajo Nation Historic Preservation Department records and Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian documentation estimate approximately 2,000 Navajo died during 4 years of captivity before the 1868 treaty allowed survivors to return. The Navajo name for Fort Sumner is Hueldi. It means the place of suffering. New Mexico has been used as a place to deposit people the government considered expendable. 8,500 Navajo were marched to Alkaline Desert and told it was their new home. 80 years later, the same state chose a different desert for a different experiment, and told the people who lived nearest to it even less than they told the Navajo. That story is the last fact in this video. Keep the pattern in mind. The Kit Carson Museum in Taos operated under that name until 1993. Hueldi means the place of suffering. The museum changed its name. The land did not. At number 14, the most beautiful place that will unalive you 3 different ways. White Sands National Park in the Tularosa Basin covers approximately 275 square miles of gypsum crystal dunes, the largest gypsum dune field on Earth, confirmed by United States Geological Survey and National Park Service documentation. Surface temperatures regularly exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The park is physically bordered by White Sands Missile Range, the largest overland military test range in the United States at 3,200 square miles. Highway 70, the only road through the area, closes without advance public notice for active weapons testing. National Park Service records document visitor deaths from heat exposure within sight of marked trails. The most photographed landscape in New Mexico is surrounded by an active missile range. The only road through it closes for live weapons tests. None of that appears in the caption. Landing at number 13, the ocean under your feet. At 10,378 feet above sea level, the summit of Sandia Crest in the Sandia Mountains east of Albuquerque exposes Pennsylvanian and Permian period marine limestone containing fossilized corals, brachiopods, crinoids, and mollusks from a shallow inland sea approximately 300 million years ago. The United States Geological Survey, the Cibola National Forest Sandia Ranger District, and the University of New Mexico Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences have all documented these formations. The Sandia Mountains are a fault block range lifted by the Rio Grande Rift. As the rift pulls the crust apart, the Sandia block rotates upward, while the Albuquerque Basin simultaneously sinks. The same rift that created the gorge near Taos is lifting the floor of a 300-million-year-old ocean toward the clouds. Put your hand on a coral at 10,378 feet. The Rio Grande Rift placed it there. The rift is still lifting. At number 12, the continent is coming apart right here. The Rio Grande Rift is an active continental rift zone extending approximately 600 miles from central Colorado through New Mexico into northern Mexico. United States Geological Survey GPS geodesy confirms active crustal extension of approximately 1 to 2 millimeters per year. The New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources at New Mexico Tech and the University of New Mexico estimate the sediment fill beneath the Albuquerque Basin at approximately 30,000 feet, nearly 6 miles of material filling the gap where the crust has separated. The rift is the geological cause of the Rio Grande Gorge, the Sandia Mountains, and the Valles Caldera. The United States Geological Survey considers a major rift earthquake in the Albuquerque metro area geologically probable on a multi-century timescale. The gorge is 800 feet deep because the rift is pulling the crust apart. The mountains exist because the rift is pulling the crust apart. The supervolcano is still warm because the rift is pulling the crust apart. All of this is happening tonight beneath a city of 600,000 people, and it is not in the news. Fact 11. The return of the wolf. The Mexican gray wolf, known scientifically as Canis lupus bailey, was declared functionally extinct in the wild by 1980 after federal predator elimination programs. United States Fish and Wildlife Service captive breeding efforts began in 1977. In March 1998, 11 wolves were released into Gila National Forest in New Mexico and the Apache Sitgreaves National Forests in Arizona, establishing the Blue Range Wolf Recovery Area. The Gila Wilderness in New Mexico, the first designated wilderness area in United States history, established in 1924 through the advocacy of Aldo Leopold, is a primary recovery zone. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service 2023 Annual Mexican Wolf Population Survey recorded 241 confirmed wolves in the wild, a record high. From functionally extinct in 1980 to 241 documented animals in 2023 inside the first wilderness area ever designated in this country. Almost no one outside New Mexico is being told about either of those facts. Coming in at number 10, the sound the government couldn't find. Since the late 1980s, approximately 2% of Taos area residents have reported a persistent low-frequency drone, described as a diesel engine idling or a vibration felt as much as heard. Standard acoustic instruments cannot detect it. In 1995, Congressman Bill Richardson of New Mexico formally requested a federal investigation. A research team assembled from Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamos National Laboratory, the University of New Mexico, and Phillips Air Force Research Laboratory conducted acoustic measurements, seismic analysis, and environmental testing over several months. Their official published report, available through the University of New Mexico Library, concluded, "The hum is real. Its source cannot be identified. It is still being reported today. Roswell gets the flying saucer McDonald's and the tourist economy. The Taos hum gets 4 national research institutions, including 2 nuclear weapons laboratories, an official government report, and a conclusion of unknown." The more interesting story has always been in the record. At number 9, the mountain that chooses how it kills you. Wheeler Peak at 13,161 feet is the highest point in New Mexico in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of Taos County. It hosts New Mexico's only documented glacial cirques, the southernmost in the Rocky Mountain system, carved during the Pleistocene. The Wheeler Peak Wilderness Area above 11,000 feet sits inside documented Class 3 through 5 avalanche terrain. New Mexico Department of Public Safety records document multiple avalanche fatalities in this range. From June through September, regular afternoon thunderstorms produce documented lightning strike deaths at summit elevations. Dangerous by avalanche in winter, dangerous by lightning in summer. The Sangre de Cristo, Blood of Christ, were named by Spanish missionaries who saw the peaks turn red at sunset. They thought it was spiritual. The Department of Public Safety's fatality record suggests it was a description. Landing at number 8, the kid who declined the pardon. Here's what Hollywood never told you about Billy the Kid. William Henry McCarty, alias William H. Bonney, was the central figure of the Lincoln County War, 1878 to 1881, in Lincoln County, New Mexico. Modern scholarship at the New Mexico State Record Center and Archives and the University of New Mexico Center for Southwest Research attributes 4 to 9 documented killings to Bonney, not 21. The war was a commercial dispute over cattle and political patronage, funded by the Santa Fe Ring. New Mexico Territorial Governor Lew Wallace, simultaneously writing Ben-Hur in the Palace of the Governors in Santa Fe, personally offered Bonney a full pardon in 1879. Bonney met with him, agreed to the terms, gave the testimony, and reneged. Pat Garrett shot him at Fort Sumner on July 14, 1881. He was 21 years old. Lew Wallace finished Ben-Hur. It sold 20 million copies and won 11 Academy Awards in its 1959 film adaptation. The Lincoln County War was about railroad speculation and political corruption. Hollywood made it a coming-of-age Western. The primary documents are in Santa Fe. They have been there since 1881. Fact 7, the spill that rewrote the record books nobody read. On July 16, 1979, a tailings pond dam at United Nuclear Corporation's uranium mill in Church Rock, New Mexico, failed. Environmental Protection Agency Superfund records, Nuclear Regulatory Commission incident documentation, and investigative reporting by Southwest Research and Information Center researcher Chris Shuey confirmed the breach released approximately 93 million gallons of radioactive liquid waste and 1,100 tons of solid radioactive tailings into the Puerco River, the largest single release of radioactive material in United States history, larger in volume than 3 Mile Island, which had occurred 110 days earlier. The contamination traveled 80 miles downstream through the Navajo Nation. Navajo families used that river for drinking water, livestock, and irrigation. The Environmental Protection Agency classified the cleanup as a state jurisdiction matter, limiting the federal response. 3 Mile Island has a major HBO series. Church Rock has neither. The largest radioactive release in American history happened on July 16, 1979. The date is the same as Trinity. You now have 2 July 16ths. There is a third. It ends this video. At number 6, the most nuclear city nobody named. The Kirtland Underground Munitions Maintenance and Storage Complex, beneath the Manzano Mountains on Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, is the largest known single concentration of nuclear warheads in the United States. Federation of American Scientists researchers Hans Christensen and Matt Korda, writing in the Nuclear Notebook series of the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, estimate approximately 1,350 to 2,500 warheads and weapons components in its underground bunkers. Sandia National Laboratories, the primary United States nuclear weapons engineering facility, is co-located with Kirtland. Los Alamos National Laboratory is 35 miles north. New Mexico hosts more nuclear weapons infrastructure than any other state in the country. Albuquerque's population is 600,000. Its international cultural associations are hot air balloons and a television show about methamphetamine. New Mexico has been the staging ground for nuclear decisions since July 16, 1945. The families who lived near Trinity were not consulted. The people this video ends with were not asked either. We are almost there. Coming in at number 5, the morning the desert made glass. At 5:29 and 45 seconds in the morning on July 16, 1945, the United States detonated the device known as the Gadget, a plutonium implosion device in the Jornada del Muerto desert basin on what is now White Sands Missile Range. Department of Energy and National Nuclear Security Administration records document the yield at approximately 21 kilotons. The explosion fused the desert soil into a pale green glassy mineral, trinitite, an artificial substance that did not exist on Earth before that second. Department of Energy and United States Geological Survey radiation monitoring documents current levels at ground zero at approximately 10 times the background radiation of the surrounding desert. The trinitite is still there. Removing it is a federal offense. The site opens twice per year, the first Saturdays of April and October. Trinity site is 35 miles from the town of Tularosa, New Mexico. On the morning of July 16, 1945, the residents of Tularosa, Carrizozo, Socorro, and San Antonio saw light brighter than the sunrise in the west before the sun had risen. Nobody called them. Nobody came to the door. Nobody told them what had just been detonated 35 miles from their children's bedrooms. The scientists stood behind reinforced barriers at a measured safe distance, wearing protective goggles, knowing exactly what was coming. Approximately 40,000 people within 50 miles were given nothing. No goggles, no iodine tablets, no warning, no evacuation order. They spent the next 77 years trying to get an answer to one question that should have been given before the first test was ever authorized. That question, and everything it cost them to ask it, is the last fact in this video. Fact 4. The 523 holes. From approximately 1944 to 1986, uranium mining on Navajo Nation land created approximately 523 documented abandoned uranium mines, confirmed by Environmental Protection Agency Superfund program records, working in partnership with the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. Navajo miners worked without dosimetry equipment, without respirators, without health warnings. At a time when Internal Atomic Energy Commission documentation confirms the agency knew that radon in uranium mines caused lung cancer. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention epidemiological studies documented significantly elevated lung cancer rates among Navajo uranium miners. As of 2023, hundreds of those 523 sites remain unreclaimed. Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry testing continues to find elevated uranium concentrations in drinking water and household soil near those sites. The uranium in America's nuclear weapons came partly from 523 mines on Navajo land. The men who dug it were not told it would kill them. The mines were abandoned. The groundwater is still contaminated. America celebrated the weapons. New Mexico absorbed the cost again. At number 3, the nuclear waste repository that exploded itself with cat litter. The Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, 26 miles east of Carlsbad, New Mexico, is the first and only operational deep geological nuclear waste repository in the United States, opened in 1999. It stores transuranic waste from the Manhattan Project and Cold War weapons production in chambers carved 2,150 feet underground into Permian-era salt 250 million years old. On February 14, 2014, a waste drum in Panel 7, Room 7, ruptured underground. The Department of Energy Accident Investigation Board's official report determined the cause. Organic packing material, wheat-based kitty litter, had been substituted for the required inorganic clay-based material, triggering an exothermic chemical reaction until the drum failed. 21 workers received internal radiation exposure. The Waste Isolation Pilot Plant closed for 2.8 years. Remediation cost approximately $500 million. Sandia National Laboratories designed permanent warning markers for the site intended to communicate danger to civilizations 10,000 years in the future, because the waste will remain hazardous longer than all of recorded human history. America's permanent answer to nuclear waste is a hole in New Mexico. In 2014, the hole exploded because of cat litter. That is in the official report. The answer to where America puts things it doesn't know what to do with has always been the same answer. Landing at number 2, the answer inside the missile range. In November 1937, Milton E. Doc Noss, a chiropodist from Clovis, New Mexico, was deer hunting with his wife Ova in the San Andres Mountains when he discovered a natural shaft near Victorio Peak. He descended. He reported 27 human skeletons bound in leather, colonial artifacts, and 292 gold bars. In 1939, he used blasting powder to enlarge the shaft and accidentally collapsed it. The land was incorporated into White Sands Proving Ground during World War II. On March 5, 1949, in Hatch, New Mexico, his business partner Charles Ryan shot him dead during a dispute over treasure rights. Doña Ana County District Court, records document Ryan's acquittal on self-defense grounds. In 1977, the Army permitted Operation Goldfinder, a formal excavation attempt. Official public conclusion: nothing confirmed found. Victorio Peak remains inside White Sands Missile Range tonight. The United States government has never officially confirmed or denied whether anything was found during or after military occupation of the site. Charles Ryan shot Doc Noss in 1949 over gold inside a mountain that is now inside an active military installation. The Army has been operating on top of the answer since 1942. This is a pattern in New Mexico. The government sits on things. The people who need the answer wait. You have seen this pattern before in this video. You are about to see it one more time. And finally, number 1. The third, July 16th. I have read every public document produced by the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium since 2005. I have read the congressional testimony. I have read the cancer documentation they carried to Washington year after year. I cannot tell you how many people in the Tularosa Basin developed cancers directly caused by Trinity fallout. Nobody can. There has never been a full federal epidemiological study of the exposed population. There is no official number. That is part of what they were asking for. Tina Cordova was born in Tularosa, New Mexico, 35 miles northeast of the Trinity test site. She was born with a thyroid condition. Her father developed thyroid cancer. In 2005, she co-founded the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium, after recognizing a pattern of cancers in her community that had no other explanation. The consortium documented cancer cases across multiple generations in communities surrounding Trinity, Tularosa, Carrizozo, San Antonio, Socorro, and that documentation runs to hundreds of families. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was first passed by Congress in 1990. It covered Nevada test site, downwinders, uranium miners, and Marshall Islands residents. Trinity test downwinders, the only American population subjected to nuclear weapons testing on United States soil and specifically excluded from compensation, were not in it. No administration has formally explained why. For the next 33 years, Tina Cordova and the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium testified before congressional committees. Bills passed the House. They stalled in the Senate. Members of the consortium died of the conditions that had brought them to Washington. The people who had watched the first flash from their porches in 1945 watched their grandchildren carry the folders they were no longer strong enough to carry themselves. In March 2024, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act amendments were signed into law, expanding coverage to include Trinity downwinders. For the first time since July 16, 1945, the federal government officially acknowledged that the families of the Tularosa Basin had been exposed to Trinity fallout and had been harmed. The legislation came 79 years after the test. Many who had spent decades fighting for it were already gone. The Trinity site still exists inside White Sands Missile Range. The Trinitite is still on the ground. The radiation at ground zero is still approximately 10 times the background level of the surrounding desert. The obelisk marks the spot. The town of Tularosa, population approximately 2,800, still sits 35 miles northeast of where it happened, on the floor of the basin that Spanish travelers named the Journey of the Dead Man 4 centuries ago. The scientists who built the bomb were wearing goggles. The families of Tularosa were given nothing. New Mexico calls itself the land of enchantment. The families of the Tularosa Basin call it something else. They call it home. They were never asked if they wanted to share it with the nuclear age. They were never asked anything. For 77 years they asked the question. In 2024, after most of them had already stopped being able to ask it, the government finally said yes. The land of enchantment, the most expensive nickname in American history.